when I think about flow, I think about it in the sense that there's no interruption in the experience of reading something. So if I have to stop and question what I just read, and if I'm interpreting that correctly and it's breaking the flow, that's not great for my experience. And so for flow to me is like each thing builds on the previous thing very organically, very naturally, and there is no kind of like harsh oh, I need to stop and look this up, or I'm not sure if I read that right. Like that's what it is to me. I'm not sure what your definition would be.
Absolutely. I agree with that point. And I like to think of flow as the glue that binds all the sentences together. As writers, we compose, one sentence at a time, and slowly start building out our paragraphs and start thinking about how you go from one paragraph to the next. But essentially, the most basic building block that a writer has is sentences. And so it's important, just like how you would bind bricks together with mortar or cement. It's important to have flow because it really binds those sentences together. And as you mentioned, creates a sense of cohesion for the reader. To give you an example of what the experience feels like, if an article has a good flow, then when the reader reaches the end of one paragraph, they should be compelled to begin reading the next paragraph. There should be a sense of excitement in their mind to read the paragraph. And once they get to the end of the second paragraph, there should be an equal level of excitement to read the third paragraph, and so on and so forth. And by the time they get to the end of the piece, they should either say, okay, I like what I read and I'm going to act upon this, or I'm going to share this with someone who I think will benefit from this information because I want to let them experience this amazing reading experience that I just went through. So those are some of the benefits of flow, which are just so important to begin thinking about.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you talk about the sentences as building blocks, because when I'm approaching a piece of writing, I'm not really getting to the sentence level until I have formed the backbone of the story, because I would say that I prioritize the flow above everything else, because I don't want something to come off completely left field or take someone by surprise or be confusing to them. So I'm really thinking about like, how is everything building a story, and that's what we've been talking about in our other discussions. But I do think sometimes people fall into this trap of writing sentence by sentence and looking at it very granularly and linearly, and not seeing the bigger picture of what that experience looks like. And it's not until somebody else reads it and they say, this doesn't make sense, why are you putting it in this order, this is missing, like then they can see that they're lacking in flow. Having an outline for flow is the absolute most critical thing that you can do, because if you don't know what the crux of the point that you're communicating is in every single paragraph, then you don't know if you're repeating yourself, you don't know if you're missing anything, you don't know if you're confusing people, you don't know if you're jumping from one thing to another without it making any sense. Like if you can really strip it back and say, what am I trying to say? And will they understand? And will they be on board with it? Then you can't really see the flow. You can't really make something flow, in my opinion. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I agree with that. It's just so important to also think about the outline, not only as a roadmap that's going to get you from the beginning to the middle of the piece, and then toward the end where you have some conclusion statements or thoughts or action items, but also as a landscape which can go up and down, which you can adjust. There are sections, there might be sections in your piece where you want the tone to convey a slight sense of urgency, and you can think about those things when you're outlining the piece and include that in the flow. You can make a note to yourself saying, I need to include some sentences here, or use some phrasing to indicate that something urgent needs to be done. Or you might find that you need to take on a more of a de-escalation approach, where you're writing about something where you feel that a few wrongly stated pseudo facts have been floating around, and you find the need to de-escalate and to infuse some real science into that piece, and to de-escalate the situation and bring it from alarmism into normalcy within society, and help people feel relaxed as they read what you've just written. So these are some things you can think about when you write as well, especially when you create an outline. One of the things that I like to do is I like to make an outline in the form of a table, where I have one column for the story, and I have the second column for the tone, and I have a third column for the flow. So as far as the story is concerned, I just put down some bullet points in terms of, okay, how can I, what elements will go into the beginning? What am I going to talk about in the middle? What are going to be the main talking points here? And what are going to be my conclusions and call to actions? So those would go in the the story column. In the tone column, I would just add a word or two, like, make it more sciencey, or keep it friendly, or keep it light. And then in the flow column, I would add little notes to myself about, convey urgency, or escalate, de-escalate, bring in a testimonial, bring in a quote, highlight with a reference, or justify with a peer-reviewed reference. So I just add little notes to myself in order to give me some guidance on how to progress through the piece. So that's one exercise that I'd like to share with you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's the same thing that I'm achieving when I'm mapping out the point A and B and the audience, because every time I'm looking back at that, I'm imagining that that's a person that I'm speaking to. And I can see, like, I know that they're resistant to something, or I know that they have a belief about something that I'm trying to question. And I can tell if there's going to be emotional resistance, if there is a really strong cultural influence, or, there's so many factors that I would want to keep in mind as I'm writing. And so, I always say to my students, if you're just writing just in a Word document with no other notes or, plan or outline, like, you're going to struggle. I think you need to at least have something alongside the actual piece to kind of keep you on track, because it's a constant reassessing and constant reflection on, am I meeting the objective that I've laid out, or that the client has laid out? And so it's sort of having that awareness of, yes, I'm writing it, but there are all these factors I need to keep in mind, and it's impossible to just have them there in the back of your mind the whole time. I think it does need to be a bit more proactive. I just had a coaching session yesterday about exactly this. Someone had written a first draft of their writing sample, and it had a lot of great qualities. It was one of the best first drafts I've seen, especially among new writers. And what he did really well is he captured the critical parts of the quotes from the interview. The sentences were quite concise. The tone was quite friendly, and the paragraphs were pretty short. And the content itself was really valuable and really interesting, but there was no flow. It absolutely did not flow at all. It was like every sentence, every paragraph was completely standalone, and I didn't feel like I was learning anything, and I didn't really understand what the piece was trying to achieve. And so what we did was we backtracked and we thought, okay, who is this for? What is the point A? What is the point B? What is this journey that we're trying to take them on? And we ended up writing a content outline based on that, because just through pinpointing exactly what we were trying to achieve with this and the transformation that we wanted the reader to have, it became very obvious what that flow should be.